Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're embarking on what might seem like a deep dive into the bureaucratic depths of tax forms. But trust me, this one is a truly crucial key for really anyone navigating the U.S. tax system. We're talking about the IRS Form W-7. That's the application for an individual taxpayer identification number, or ITIN. For millions, this isn't just paperwork. It's the gateway to tax compliance, to unlocking specific financial benefits and, avoiding significant headaches down the line. We're going to pull back the curtain on common misunderstandings, reveal some surprising nuances, and show you how understanding this form is, well, it's a real shortcut to being well informed.
And that's precisely why this deep dive is so vital. Yeah. While the ITN might sound like a niche topic, its implications are incredibly broad, touching individuals from diverse backgrounds, students, investors, families, even those who aren't authorized to work in the U.S. Understanding the W-7 isn't just about ticking a box. It's about ensuring accurate tax reporting, preventing penalties, and perhaps most importantly for many, accessing specific tax advantages that can significantly impact their financial well-being. It's about making sure you're playing by the rules and getting what you're entitled to.
Okay, let's truly unpack this then. What exactly is an ITN? It might sound a bit like a secret code, but it's actually a very practical and specific tool the IRS uses. At its core, an ITIN is a unique 9-digit tax processing number issued by the IRS. Now, here's the really critical distinction, the bedrock of what an ITIN is for. It's exclusively for individuals who are required to have a U.S. taxpayer identification number for federal tax purposes, but who for various reasons do not have and are not eligible to get a Social Security number, or SSN. Think of it as a parallel identification system, but one strictly for tax purposes. And the Form W-7, that's your official application to either obtain a brand new ITIN or to renew one that's expired.
Right. It's fascinating how often people confuse ITNs with SSNs given their vastly different purposes and, well, limitations. A fundamental insight here is that the ITN carves out a specific tax identity for individuals without granting access to, say, social welfare programs or broad family benefits that are intrinsically tied to citizenship, permanent residency, or work authorization. And ITN is only for federal tax purposes. That's it. It does not, under any circumstances, authorize you to work in the U.S. It won't change your immigration status, and it absolutely does not entitle you to Social Security benefits. This is a carefully designed distinction, not merely a workaround for an SSN. And here's a crucial caution that we simply can't stress enough. If you already possess an SSN, or if you already possess an SSN, or if you are eligible to obtain one, for instance, if you're a U.S. citizen, a lawful permanent resident, or if you're authorized for U.S. employment, you must not complete Form W-7. In those scenarios, your path is to apply for an SSN using Form SS5.
So just to be crystal clear, if you've applied for an SSN and your application is still pending with the Social Security Administration, you just wait. You hold off on the W-7 until you get their determination.
Right, exactly. Don't jump the gun.
It's only if the SSA issues you a formal denial letter for an SSN that you would then attach that letter to your Form W-7. And here's another vital point. Once an SSN is issued to you, you must use that SSN for all U.S. federal tax purposes instead of any previously issued ITN, even if your employment authorization changes or is lost later on.
That's right. The SSN overrides the ITN permanently.
The IRS will not issue an ITN to anyone who already has an SSN. So the core principle is ITN if you are legally unable to get an SSN, and SSN if you can. Simple, yet so often misunderstood.
Precisely. And this leads us directly into what, for many listeners, is a really significant consideration, how ITNs impact your access to various tax benefits. Individuals who file their tax returns using an ITN are, by law, not eligible for the Earned Income Credit, or EIC.
Ah, the EIC, that's a big one.
It is. It's a substantial credit designed to help low to moderate income workers, and it's simply not available to ITN holders, period. Furthermore, for tax years spanning from 2018 through 2025, if a child has an ITN on, they cannot be claimed as a qualifying child for either the child tax credit or the additional child tax credit.
Okay, so that impacts families directly, CTC and ACTC.
Hugely. These are powerful tax credits that can significantly reduce a family's tax liability or even result in a refund. So this limitation is a really big deal for many families using ITNs. It means while an ITN helps you comply with your tax obligations, it also, defines clear boundaries regarding certain broadly available family-centric tax-saving avenues.
That's a vital piece of information for anyone looking to optimize their tax situation. It's not just about what an ITN enables, but also what it precludes.
Exactly.
Oh,
Couldn't have said it better. Another common area of confusion is when an ITN is not needed. For instance, an ITN is generally not required for making estimated tax payments, those made with Form 1040-ES,
mhm.
or when filing an extension for your tax return using Form 4868.
Oh, interesting. So you can send those in without the number.
Yes, you can actually mail these forms and associated payments without having an ITN in hand. The ITN itself will only be issued after you file your complete U.S. federal tax return with the Form W-7 attached, and all the other application requirements are met. However, and this is important, there's a serious caution about timely filing that bears repeating. Failing to file your tax return, along with a complete Form W-7 and all necessary documentation by the due date, well, that could result in the denial of certain refundable credits, such as the American Opportunity Tax Credit, or AOTC,
Even if you qualify otherwise.
even if you otherwise qualify for these credits, yeah.
Mm.
A late or incomplete ITN application could cost you those potential tax reductions. So the ITN is a prerequisite for accessing some tax benefits, and timely filing is a prerequisite for that ITN. It's all linked.
Okay. So who actually falls into this specific category of needing an ITR? You said it's diverse. It's a much more varied group than many might initially assume, extending far beyond, the image of someone simply working without an SSN. The general rule, as we've established, is for individuals who are not eligible for an SSN but are nonetheless required to have a tax identification number for U.S. federal tax purposes, or simply to file a federal tax return.
Right, and this raises a truly important question that's crucial for unlocking specific tax benefits. What exactly is an allowable tax benefit for spouses and dependents after 2017?
Ah, that post-2017 change.
Yeah, this was a deliberate shift in IRS policy designed to ensure that ITNs are only issued when there's a genuine tax compliance or benefit claiming need, not just, to have a number. The source material emphasizes that for tax years after December 31st, 2017, spouses and dependents are not eligible for an ITN or even to renew one
Oh, correct.
unless they're either filing their own U.S. federal tax return or they're claimed for an allowable tax benefit on another person's attached U.S. federal tax return.
So they need to be tied to a specific benefit on that return.
Exactly. This isn't a blanket permission. It means they must be specifically listed on that return, often with a particular schedule, form, or even just a checkbox that applies to that specific benefit. The IDN, in these cases, directly enables some key tax advantages that can significantly reduce a family's overall tax liability.
All right, so let's deep dive into these allowable tax benefits because this is where the ITN becomes instrumental, really, in accessing specific, often significant tax reductions that might otherwise be unavailable. These aren't just minor deductions we're talking about. They can lead to real savings, right?
Absolutely. Real savings.
Yeah.
The IRS explicitly lists several scenarios where an ITN is a prerequisite to claiming certain benefits. First, if you have a spouse filing a joint return, the ITN allows that spouse to be properly included. Simple as that. Many couples find that filing jointly results in a lower overall tax liability than filing separately. It often provides access to more favorable tax brackets and credits.
Standard advice, usually.
All right, so the ITN here directly supports a common and powerful tax saving strategy for married couples. Without it, the married filing separate status, which often carries a higher tax burden, might be the only option. Next, for individuals seeking to file as head of household, or HOH, an ITN is necessary for the qualifying person.
The qualifying person needs the ITN.
Yes. HOH status typically provides a more generous standard deduction and more favorable tax rates than filing a single, so it's worth pursuing if you qualify. If Form W-7 is submitted to claim HOH status, the attached tax return must check the HOH box and list the ITN applicant as a dependent. This dependent must be a qualifying child or relative who lived with the taxpayer for more than half a year or be the taxpayer's parent. Now, crucially, an ITN will not be assigned or renewed for an HOH qualifying person who is not also claimed as a dependent on the attached tax return.
Ah, so they have to be listed as a dependent, too. Got it.
Ensures the ITN serves a direct tax purpose, enabling access to that tax-reducing filing status. Similarly, for qualifying surviving spouse, or QSS, the ITN applicant must be a child or stepchild who lived with the taxpayer the entire year. Like HOH, QSS often provides a significantly more advantageous tax filing status, allowing the taxpayer to use joint return rates for up to 2 years after the death of their spouse.
Which can make a huge difference financially during a tough time.
Absolutely. It can dramatically reduce their tax burden. The ITN is essential for the child to qualify the taxpayer for this status,
Yeah.
again, directly impacting the taxpayer's liability. Then we move into education credits. The American Opportunity Tax Credit, or AOTC, is a prime example.
AOTC, yeah, that's a big one for students.
It really is. This credit can provide up to $2,500 for eligible students, a dollar-for-dollar reduction in taxes owed, making it a powerful financial benefit. If Form W-7 is submitted to claim the AOTC, it requires an attached tax return and Form 8863, which lists the ITN applicant, the student, as a dependent. Without the ITN for the student, this significant credit is simply, well, it's out of reach. Another crucial benefit tied to healthcare is the Premium Tax Credit, or PTC.
For marketplace insurance.
Exactly. If Form W-7 submitted to claim the PTC, an attached tax return listing the applicant as a dependent, and Form 8962 are required. The PTC helps eligible individuals and families afford health insurance purchased through the health insurance marketplace. It's critical financial support for health access for many. And ITN is the key to ensuring all eligible family members are included in the PTC calculation, which can directly increase the amount of credit received, easing the financial burden of healthcare. The Child Independent Care Credit, or CDCC, is also directly impacted.
For childcare costs.
Right. This credit helps taxpayers offset expenses paid for the care of a qualifying child or dependent so the taxpayer can work or look for work. Form W-7 can be submitted for a dependent claim for the CDCC, even if the attached return has no tax liability to be reduced by the credit itself.
Oh, even with no tax liability.
Yes. It still requires an attached return listing the applicant as a dependent in Form 2441. The ITIN is critical for properly identifying the qualifying person for this credit, ensuring eligible care expenses are recognized. And finally, the credit for other dependents, or ODC. This is a non-refundable credit of up to $500 per qualifying person.
The ODC, right.
Like the CDCC, Form W-7 can be submitted even if there's no tax to be reduced, meaning it can still provide a benefit by reducing your tax liability down to zero. It requires an attached return listing the applicant as a dependent, with the credit for other dependents box explicitly checked.
Explicitly checked. That sounds important.
Very important detail. The dependent must be a U.S. resident or national. Merely listing a dependent isn't enough. That ODC box must be explicitly checked for the ITN to be assigned or renewed for this purpose. This ensures you claim every possible dollar you're entitled to for qualifying dependents.
Okay, wow. So what does all of this really mean for someone looking to reduce their tax burden and maximize their return, it sounds like? It means the ITN in these specific scenarios isn't a direct tax-saving method in itself, like a deduction or a loophole.
No.
Instead, it is the absolute prerequisite, the essential key to accessing these specific credits or filing statuses that can, in turn, significantly reduce your tax burden. Without that ITN for qualifying individuals on your return, these potentially very valuable benefits might be entirely lost. It's about being able to properly identify everyone on your tax return so that you can legally claim all the benefits you're entitled to, ensuring you're not leaving money on the table just because of an identification gap.
Exactly. Perfectly put. It's about ensuring you can leverage all the tools available within the tax code to optimize your situation. The ITN is that crucial bridge.
Okay. Now that we've thoroughly explored why an ITN matters and who is eligible, let's get into the how, the practical steps. Applying for an ITN isn't just about filling out one form, it's about assembling a complete application package. Think of it like building a puzzle where every piece has to fit perfectly. For a new ITN, this package has 3 core components. First, your completed Form W-7. And a helpful tip here. If you prefer to receive all IRS correspondence in Spanish, you have the option to submit Form W-7 SP.
Good tip.
Second, you need your original U.S. federal tax return or returns. This is critical. The W-7 must be attached securely to the front of your tax return, and you should leave the SSN area blank for anyone applying for an ITN. If you're applying for multiple ITNs, say for a spouse and children, you attach all the Forms W-7 to the same tax return. And finally, number 3, you need the required supporting documentation, meticulously ensuring consistency of information like name, date of birth, and citizenship between the W-7 and your documents. Any mismatch here is a common reason for rejection.
Yeah, that package concept is truly critical because missing even one piece or having inconsistent information can cause significant delays in processing your ITIN and, by extension, your tax return. They could really hold things up. Let's talk about timing for first-time applications. You should file your complete application package on or before the tax return due date. That's the deadline. If, for any reason, you find yourself unable to file your tax return by the due date, you must file an extension for the tax return separately, Form 4868. We emphasized this earlier, but it's worth reiterating the, frankly, stark consequence. Failure to timely file the tax return with a complete Form W-7 and all required documentation may result in the denial of potentially valuable refundable credits, like the AOTC.
That American Opportunity Tax Credit again.
Exactly, even if you would otherwise qualify. So
Yeah.
timely submission isn't just a formality, it directly impacts your ability to claim those significant tax benefits.
That's a major heads up, especially for our listeners who are meticulously planning to reduce their tax liability through eligible credits. Timing really is everything here.
It absolutely is. And another crucial technical point regarding filing. You cannot electronically file, or e-file, a return using an ITN in the calendar year the ITN is assigned.
Oh, really? No e-filing the first year?
Nope. This means if you apply for and receive an ITN this year, 2025, let's say, you won't be able to e-file any return using that new ITN until 2026. It's a manual paper process initially. However, if you have multiple years of tax returns that need to be filed and they all require this new ITN, you can attach them all to your single Form W-7 and submit them together via mail or in person.
Okay, so you can bundle past years with the current application.
Right. This avoids having to wait to e-file previous year's returns. You get them all done at once on paper.
What about renewing an existing ITN? When does that need to happen, and what's the process there? Is it the same?
That's a point where many people stumble, actually. You only need to renew an ITN if it has expired, and you plan to include it on a U.S. federal tax return in the current year. An ITN expires if it hasn't been included on at least one U.S. federal tax return for the last 3 consecutive tax years. So use it or lose it, essentially.
3 years of non-use.
Right. Also, all ITNs assigned before 2013 and never renewed automatically expired and must be renewed if you plan to use them now. The renewal application package pretty much mirrors a new application. You'll need a completed Form W-7, making sure to check the renewal box and fill in your expired ITN information, your original tax return where the ITN is listed, and all necessary supporting documents. The direct consequence of not renewing an expired ITN when you need to use it on a tax return is simply a delayed processing of that return. It holds everything up.
Can hold up refunds too, presumably?
Absolutely. Can hold up refunds or create other processing issues. And remember, for spouses and dependents, if you're renewing their ITN, they must still be listed on an attached tax return for an allowable tax benefit, just as we discussed for new applications. This just reinforces the ITN's role in enabling those specific tax advantages, even when you're just renewing it.
Okay, now we get to the supporting documentation. Here's where it gets really detailed because the requirements are incredibly precise. This is probably the single most common reason applications get held up or even rejected, isn't it?
Without a doubt, this is the hurdle for many.
So paying close attention here is absolutely key to avoiding delays and ensuring your application sails through. The core requirements are that your documents must accomplish 2 things. First, establish your identity, and second, establish your foreign status, meaning your connection to a foreign country. You must submit original documents or certified copies from the issuing agency like an embassy or consulate, not just photocopies.
Right, originals or certified copies only.
These documents must be current, not expired, at the time you submit your application. And critically, at least one document must contain your photograph. Unless you're a dependent under age 14 or under 18 if you're a student. That photo requirement is a common tripped-up point I hear.
It is. That's a perfect summary. Now the passport. The passport is truly the standalone champion here. It's the only document that can establish both identity and foreign status on its own.
Just the passport. That's it.
Usually, yes, provided it's current and has a date of entry if required for dependents, which we'll get to. If you don't have a passport, then you'll need at least 2 other documents from the IRS's approved list. These 2 documents combined must prove both your identity and your foreign status and collectively meet that photograph requirement we just mentioned. So, for example, a U.S. driver's license or a U.S. state ID primarily proves identity, but you'd need a second document, like maybe a foreign birth certificate, to prove foreign status. A foreign driver's license or a national ID card with a photo might in some cases cover both. It depends on the specific document. A civil birth certificate can establish identity and foreign status if it's foreign, and it's considered current at all times because, birth certificates don't expire.
Right.
An original birth certificate is specifically required for applicants under 18 if they haven't provided a valid passport.
And then there are those specific rules for medical and school records, which are often used for younger dependents, right? This is
Mhm.
where it gets particularly nuanced.
Indeed, very nuanced. For medical records, these are accepted only for dependents under age 6. The document must be official, like a shot or immunization record or a dated letter from a medical provider on official letterhead, signed. Needs that official look. It needs to clearly show the applicant's name and address, a U.S. address,
Yep.
if U.S. residency is required for the specific ITIN reason, the date of medical care, which must be within 12 months of the W-7 application date, and the doctor's name and medical facility's address, again, a U.S. address, if U.S. residency is needed. You can even combine multiple official documents, say a letter and a shot record, to meet all these specific requirements. For school records, these are accepted only for dependents under age 24, if they are a student.
Under 24 and a student. Okay.
Right. Like medical records, it must be an official document, a report card, transcript, or a dated, signed letter from a school official on school letterhead. It needs to clearly show the applicant's name and address, U.S. address if residency is required, a record of attendance or coursework with grades, the school's name and address, again, U.S. address if residency is required, and school term dates that ended no more than 12 months from the W-7 application date. Similar to medical records, a combination of official documents can fulfill these requirements. The specificity here, it's really to prevent fraudulent applications, ensuring the IRS has credible proof of identity and the applicant's situation.
Okay, what's the practical difference when submitting original documents versus certified copies? And are there any sort of flexibilities there? Is one better than the other?
This is a really important distinction for managing your valuable documents. You can submit original documents, like your actual passport or birth certificate. The IRS will review them and then return them to you at the mailing address you provided on Form W-7. If you're anxious about their return, you can even include a prepaid express mail or courier envelope for faster, more secure delivery back to you.
That's probably a good idea for something like a passport.
Definitely. Alternatively, and this is often preferred, especially for valuable docs, you can submit certified copies from the issuing agency itself. These are copies that bear an official stamped seal from the agency that issued the document, or you can get them certified by a U.S. embassy or consulate overseas. This option is particularly beneficial if you need your original documents for other purposes, like travel, within that, say, 60-day processing window. In fact, the IRS specifically advises applying in person at a designated Taxpayer Assistance Center, or TAC, or through a certifying acceptance agent if you need your original documents back quickly, sometimes within minutes.
We'll get to those options later.
Right. And here's a helpful flexibility. Electronically received and printed school or medical records, bank statements, utility bills, or rental statements may be considered original if they meet all the other content criteria.
Oh, okay. So printouts can work sometimes.
Yes, it's a modern concession that definitely helps many applicants.
This is truly where the fine print can trip people up, especially when it comes to dependents. You mentioned it briefly, but there's a specific, often overlooked requirement for proving U.S. residency for applicants claimed as dependents. Why is that residency proof needed?
Absolutely. It's a key point. The general rule is that applicants claimed as dependents, which corresponds to Reason D on Form W-7, typically need to provide specific documentation to prove U.S. residency. This is because many of the allowable tax benefits for dependents, like the child and dependent care credit or the credit for other dependents we discussed, are tied to the dependent actually residing in the U.S.
Makes sense. The benefit is for someone living here.
Exactly. It's to ensure the benefits are for those genuinely residing here. However, there are crucial exceptions to this residency proof requirement. Dependents of U.S. military personnel stationed overseas are exempt, recognizing their unique circumstances. Also, dependents from Canada or Mexico claimed for any allowable tax benefit other than the credit for other dependents, ODC, are exempt.
Okay, that's very specific. Any benefit except ODC for Canadians, Mexicans.
Precisely. If they're claimed for the ODC, then they do need to prove U.S. residency unless they fall under the military dependent exception. This is a common pitfall, that little ODC detail.
So if you're not exempt, what documents do you need to actually prove U.S. residency for a dependent? What works?
Okay, if you're not exempt, the requirements vary by the dependent's age. For dependents under 6 years of age, you typically need a valid U.S. medical record, a U.S. school record, a U.S. state ID, or a U.S. visa, assuming these meet all the general supporting documentation rules we just discussed, like being current and official. For those 6 to under 18 years of age, it's a similar list: a valid U.S. school record, U.S. state ID, U.S. driver's license, or a U.S. visa. And for dependents 18 years of age or older, the options expand slightly. You can use a valid U.S. school record, but only if they're under 24, a U.S. state ID, a U.S. driver's license, a U.S. visa, or even things like a U.S. bank statement, a U.S. rental statement, or a U.S. utility bill.
Things showing a U.S. address, basically.
Exactly. They have to clearly list the applicant's name and a U.S. address. The IRS is looking for verifiable proof that the dependent is indeed living in the U.S.
That distinction with the passport is interesting. I always thought a passport was, the absolute gold standard, the be-all and end-all document.
It generally is the gold standard for identity and foreign status, absolutely. But for dependents, there's a specific caveat that often surprises people. A passport with a date of entry stamp into the U.S. generally suffices for dependents. It fulfills identity, foreign status, and U.S. residency proof all in one document. Great.
Okay, so the entry stamp is key.
It is. However, a passport without a visible date of entry will not be accepted as a standalone identification document for certain dependents who are required to provide U.S. residency proof. This means even if you have a perfectly valid passport, if it lacks that entry date, you might still need additional documentation like a school record or medical record to prove that U.S. residency for your dependent.
Wow, okay. That's a very specific detail.
It's a very specific detail, but it's a common reason for application delays or outright rejections for dependents. So our final advice here is just painstakingly assess the quality and completeness of all your documents, especially non-government issued ones like medical or school records. Ensure they're clear, legible, and meet every single requirement on the IRS's checklist. A little extra time spent up front can save you weeks or months of waiting and hassle.
All right. You've diligently got your complete application package ready, all the right forms, meticulously checked documents. Now, the big question, where do you actually send it? You actually have a few options, each with its own pros and cons, catering to different needs, right?
That's right. Several ways to submit.
The most common and straightforward is probably by mail. You send Form W-7, your tax return, if applicable, and all your original supporting documentation or certified copies to a specific IRS ITN operation P.O. Box in Austin, Texas. And this is crucial. Do not use the general mailing address found in your tax return instructions. Your ITN application package needs to go to a specialized unit.
Right, it's a dedicated address just for ITNs.
Using the wrong address is a common reason for significant delays.
Absolutely. That's a point many people miss, causing unnecessary holdups. Now, if you prefer to use a private delivery service like, FedEx, UPS, or DHL, there's a different physical street address for the IRS ITIN operation, also located in Austin. This method typically offers the advantage of getting written proof of your mailing date and tracking capabilities, which honestly can be incredibly useful for peace of mind and verifying your submission went through.
Yeah, tracking is always good with important documents. What about applying in person? Many people prefer that, especially when dealing with sensitive documents like passports.
That's option 3. In person at designated IRS Taxpayer Assistance Centers, or TAX. This can be an excellent route, particularly if you need your original documents returned to you immediately. Certain designated TACs are equipped to verify original documentation like passports, national ID cards, and birth certificates for dependents, and then return them to you right there on the spot.
Oh, immediately. That's great.
Yeah, it eliminates the worry of mailing valuable personal documents. However, service at these TACs is strictly by appointment only, and you'll need to call a specific IRS number to schedule. You can't just walk in. And it's really important to know that TACs not offering ITN authentication will simply mail your original documents to the IRS processing center anyway.
So it defeats the purpose of going in person then?
Exactly. It can still cause delays and defeats the purpose. So always confirm if your local TAC offers the specific ITN document authentication service before you make an appointment and go.
And the fourth option involves using an authorized agent, right? That sounds like it could be a helpful shortcut for some people.
It absolutely can be. That's applying through an acceptance agent, or AA, or even better, a certifying acceptance agent, or CAA. An AA is an individual or entity authorized by the IRS to help you complete and file Form W-7. They can review your documents. However, they still need to mail your original documentation or certified copies to the IRS for processing, similar to mailing it yourself.
So they help prepare, but still mail the docs.
Right. A CAA, on the other hand, is generally a superior option if you need your original documents back quickly because they have special authorization from the IRS. They can verify original documents and certified copies for primary and secondary applicants, as well as for dependents, though they do have some limitations. For example, they cannot verify foreign military IDs. A CAA will review and authenticate your documentation on the spot, return your originals to you immediately, and then forward the application package to the IRS.
Ah, so the CAA can give your originals back right away.
Correct. This saves you the worry of mailing valuable originals. You can find lists of these authorized agents, both AKs and CAAs, conveniently on irs.gov.
Okay. Understanding processing times is absolutely crucial for managing expectations, especially when your tax return, maybe even a refund, hinges on getting that ITAN. And what if you need to apply for a deceased taxpayer? That sounds like a very specific, sensitive situation.
Indeed, managing expectations on timing is key. The IRS generally advises allowing about 7 weeks for them to notify you of your ITIN application status. That's when they typically send you your ITIN assignment letter or, unfortunately, a denial letter. However, during peak processing periods, which are typically from January 15th through April 30th, tax season, essentially, or if you're filing from overseas, it can take longer, usually between 9 to 11 weeks.
So potentially almost 3 months during tax season.
Potentially, yes. If you haven't received your ITN or any correspondence after that time frame, you can call the IRS directly using their provided telephone numbers for assistance. Now, regarding special cases, specifically for deceased taxpayers, there are distinct and precise requirements. It's a sensitive process. When requesting an ITN for someone who has passed away, you must clearly write deceased and the date of death across the top of Form W-7. Additionally, the specific documentation needed depends on who is filing the application. If it's the surviving spouse filing an original or amended joint return with their deceased spouse, they need to include the Form W-7, the U.S. individual income tax return, and documentation substantiating the identity and foreign status of the deceased. If it's a court-appointed executor or administrator filing on behalf of the deceased, they also need the Form W-7, the tax return, identity, and foreign status documents, plus a certified copy of the court certificate showing their appointment.
Proof they're the executor.
Right. And if it's neither the surviving spouse nor the court-appointed executor, they'll need all of the above, plus Form 1310, Statement of Person, claiming refund due a deceased taxpayer, if a refund is due to the estate, and a copy of the death certificate. And a specific note for deceased individuals under 18. A birth certificate is required unless a passport with a date of entry into the U.S. is submitted. These are critical details to ensure the ITN is properly issued for tax compliance related to the deceased's estate, hopefully avoiding further distress during an already difficult time.
Okay, now let's get into the form itself, Form W-7, line by line almost. Every box, every line has a specific purpose, and understanding them helps ensure a smooth application process. First up, application type. This is a simple yet critical choice at the very top. Are you a first-time applicant seeking a new ITIN, or are you seeking to renew an existing ITIN? If you check Renew an existing ITIN, you then must complete lines 6C and 6V to provide your previously assigned ITIN and the name under which it was issued. This helps the IRS, locate your old record.
That's a crucial distinction right at the start.
Yeah.
The IRS wants to know if you've ever had one before to avoid issuing duplicate numbers and to properly link your current application to your tax history. It's a key anti-fraud measure and, frankly, an efficiency check.
Exactly. Then you move to the reason for submitting Form W-7. There are boxes A through H. You must check the box that best explains your reason, even if you're just renewing. Picking the right box is fundamental because it dictates the kind of supporting documentation you might need to attach. Let's break down these reasons, focusing on why they matter for you, the applicant, especially regarding potential tax implications. Option A, non-resident alien claiming a tax treaty benefit. If you check this, you also have to check box H and identify an exception type, usually exception 1 or 2, and name the specific treaty, country, and article you're relying on.
A lot of detail needed there.
Yes. This is absolutely critical for properly claiming a reduced withholding rate on certain types of U.S.-sourced income, like pensions, dividends, or maybe even wages if you're a student or researcher from a treaty country. This can lead to significant tax savings by reducing the immediate tax bite on your income. Without the ITN for this reason, you might face the full U.S. statutory withholding rate, which can be as high as 30%,
Right, so getting the ITN lets you claim that lowered treaty rate up front. Option B, non-resident alien filing a U.S. federal tax return. This covers broad situations where you're reporting U.S.-sourced income, perhaps from investments, or maybe you're just claiming a refund of over-withheld taxes.
Pretty common reason.
Very common. If you check this, you must have a foreign, non-U.S. address on line 3. This is the go-to reason for many non-U.S. individuals who have U.S. income but aren't considered residents for tax purposes. Option C, U.S. resident alien, based on the substantial presence test, filing a U.S. federal tax return but ineligible for an SSN.
Okay, substantial presence test. That means you've been in the U.S. long enough to be taxed like a resident, basically.
Essentially, yes. You spent enough days here over a 3-year period to be considered a resident for U.S. tax purposes, even if you don't have a green card. If you fall into this category and can't get an SSN, you'd need to include your date of entry on line 6 pen. This ensures you're taxed as a U.S. resident, which often has different implications and potential tax benefits compared to being taxed as a non-resident. Option D, dependent of a U.S. citizen resident alien. Here, you must provide the relationship, parent, child, etc., and the U.S. citizen resident alien's name and SSN or ITN.
And that date of entry on six pets again?
Usually required, yes, unless specific exceptions apply, like the military overseas or Canadian-Mexican dependents not claiming the ODC. This connects directly back to those allowable tax benefits we discussed earlier, things like the AOTC, CDCC, or ODC. The ITN here is the gateway to claiming these specific credits, which can directly reduce your tax liability or even provide a refund. Without the ITN for the dependent, these specific tax-saving opportunities might just be lost. Option E, spouse of a U.S. citizen resident alien. This includes non-filing spouses who might have been claimed as exemptions, that's pre-2018 mostly, or more commonly now, those who are electing to file a joint return with their U.S. citizen resident alien spouse. So for filing jointly.
Right. You'll need to provide the U.S. citizen resident alien's name and SSN or ITIN. Again, for joint filers, an ITN enables a potentially more favorable filing status and access to combined deductions and credits, contributing significantly to overall tax efficiency for the household. This is a crucial enabler of marital tax benefits. Option F, non-resident alien student, professor, or researcher filing a U.S. federal tax return or claiming an exception. If you check this, you must complete lines 6A, 6C, 6 pence, and 6G, and typically provide your passport with a valid U.S. visa, unless you're from Canada, Mexico, or Bermuda. Specific lines to fill out for this group.
Yes. And if you're on an F1, J1, or M1 visa but won't be employed and thus ineligible for an SSN, you can attach a letter from your designated school official, DSO, or responsible officer, RO, instead of an SSA denial letter.
Oh, that simplifies it if you're not working.
It does. This helps streamline the application for individuals primarily focused on study or research who can't get an SSN but need to report taxable scholarships or claim treaty benefits, which, again, can directly reduce their tax liability. Option G, dependent spouse of a non-resident alien holding a U.S. visa. You'd attach a copy of the visa and include your date of entry on line 6 pen. This allows families of visa holders to be properly identified for tax purposes, even if they're not directly earning U.S. income themselves. Option H, other. This is the catch-all. If no other box applies, you check this and provide a detailed description. This often comes up when third parties like banks or financial institutions request an ITN for information reporting or withholding purposes, even if you're not filing a full tax return yet.
Ah, so the bank might need it for their reporting.
Exactly. If this is your reason, you might be able to claim one of the specific exceptions to the tax return requirement, which we should definitely dive into next. Yes, this other box, especially when linked to these exceptions, leads to crucial scenarios where you need an ITN but aren't filing a full tax return yet. This is a highly nuanced area and often overlooked, but understanding it can prevent unnecessary tax filings or issues with financial institutions. It's about getting the ITN for compliance or specific withholding situations before your annual tax return is due. The IRS details 5 main exceptions where you can apply for an ITN without attaching a tax return, but for each, you must provide specific detailed documentation instead. This is vital for precision. Let's break down these exceptions. Exception 1. Passive income third-party withholding or tax treaty benefits. Scenario. This applies if you're receiving passive income like partnership income, interest from U.S. bank accounts, business or individual, pensions, annuities, rentals, royalties, or dividends. Basically, income you're not actively working for. Scenario. And this income is either subject to U.S. withholding or reporting requirements, or if you're claiming tax treaty benefits on such income to reduce that withholding. Example. Imagine you're a foreign investor with a U.S. bank account earning interest, or a retiree receiving a pension from a U.S. source. Documentation. You need specific proof, like a copy of a partnership agreement, or an original signed letter from your bank verifying the account and its reporting requirement. For distributions like pensions, an original document or signed letter from the withholding agent is needed. Key point. If you're otherwise required to file a federal tax return for other reasons, you generally aren't eligible for Exception 1. This is specifically for situations where you need the ITN solely for withholding or reporting on this passive income. This can directly reduce your tax burden by applying a treaty rate from the outset.
So it avoids that 30% withholding sometimes. Exception 2. Other income. Example, wages, scholarships, gambling. Scenario. This exception applies if you're claiming tax treaty benefits on U.S. wages, scholarships, or gambling income, or if you're receiving taxable scholarships or grants without claiming a treaty benefit. Example, you're a foreign student on a scholarship and a tax treaty reduces the tax on it. You need an ITIN to claim that benefit up front, or maybe you had some gambling winnings. Documentation. For wages, you'd need an employment letter contract, proof of treaty entitlement, and Form 8233. For scholarships, it's a letter from the college, maybe treaty proof, Form W8BSA, and an SSA denial letter. Documentation. But for F1, J1, or M1 students who are not working, remember that letter from your DSO or RO stating you won't secure employment can substitute for the SSA denial letter, makes it easier. Benefit. This exception allows individuals receiving these specific types of income to get an ITF for correct withholding or to claim treaty benefits immediately, directly reducing their tax liability on that income from day one instead of waiting for a refund later. Exception 3. Mortgage interest third-party reporting. Scenario. This is pretty specific. It's for individuals who have a home mortgage loan on U.S. real property and the lender needs to report the mortgage interest paid to the IRS. Documentation. You'd need evidence of the loan, like a copy of the contract of sale or maybe the closing documents. Purpose. This ITN ensures the lender can properly report the interest paid, which is mainly a compliance measure for the lender, though it could be relevant for the borrower's taxes depending on their situation. Exception 4. Dispositions by a foreign person of U.S. real property interest third-party withholding. Scenario. Scenario. This applies if you're involved as a seller in the sale of U.S. real estate as a foreign person. These sales generally require the buyer to withhold a portion of the sales price for taxes, need for ITN. You need an ITN to correctly report this withholding and later, potentially claim a refund or adjust your tax liability on your U.S. tax return. Documentation. This involves forms like Form 8288, 8280A, or 8288B, plus a copy of the real estate sales contract, settlement statement, or closing disclosure. Impact. The ITN ensures correct FIRPITA withholding, a crucial part of U.S. tax law for foreign investors, and allows for proper reporting and potential refund claims later. It ensures compliance and potentially reduces the overall tax impact. Exception 5. Treasury Decision. TD 9363, Reporting Obligations. Scenario. This is a more niche exception, really, for non-U.S. representatives of foreign corporations who need an ITN specifically to meet their electronic filing requirements under this particular Treasury decision. Documentation. You'd need an original signed letter from your employer on corporate letterhead stating the ITN is needed for TD 9363 and confirming you're the designated responsible person. Goal. This ensures corporations can comply with specific IRS electronic filing mandates. Purely compliance-driven. Okay, got it. So even after picking your primary reason for submitting, or maybe one of those exceptions, there is still specific pieces of information needed on the lines of the form itself. It's really about filling in every applicable section accurately because tiny omissions or errors are often the reason for delays or outright rejection. Let's maybe quickly go through some key lines, highlighting common pitfalls. Line 1A, name. This is for your full legal name, exactly as it appears on your identifying documents and how you want it to appear on your tax return. And if your name changed...
Good point. If you're renewing an ITN and your name has legally changed, say due to marriage or a court order, you'll need to submit official documentation proving that name change along with your W-7. This keeps everything consistent. Line 1B, name on birth certificate. If the name on your birth certificate is different from your current legal name on line 1A, you must provide it here. Helps the IRS connect the dots. Line 2, mailing address. This is the address where the IRS will send all official correspondence, your ITN notice, return of original documents. But be careful here.
Right. Crucial caution. This address is not automatically used to update your general IRS records for other purposes unless you include a tax return with your W-7. If you're not attaching a return and you need to update your address for other IRS mail, you should also file Form 8822, Change of Address.
Separate form for general address changes.
Exactly. Also, only U.S. Postal Service, USPS post office boxes are allowed here. Private P.O. boxes are generally not accepted. Line 3, foreign address. This line is for your complete permanent or normal residence address in your country of citizenship. You must fill this out even if your mailing address on line 2 is in the U.S.
And if claiming a treaty benefit.
Then the country you list here must be the treaty country. Important caution. Do not use a P.O. box or an in care of co address on line 2 if you're only putting a country name on line 3. Your application might get rejected for insufficient address info. Needs a full address. Line 4, date of birth. Enter your date of birth in month-day year format, MMDDYYYY. Simple, but any error here flags the application immediately. Line 6A, country of citizenship. Enter the full name of your country or countries of citizenship. No abbreviations allowed, spell it out. Line 6B, foreign tax ID. If your country of residence has issued you a foreign tax identification number, like a Canadian SIN or similar national ID, enter it here. Helps with the International Tax Info Exchange. Line 6C, U.S. non-immigrant visa information. If you are in the U.S. on a non-immigrant visa like F1, J1, H1B, etc., you must provide your USCIS classification, UGF1, your visa number, and its expiration date. You'll also need to attach a copy of your I-20 or I-94, verifies your status. Line 6D, identity document and date of entry. Okay, multi-part line. First, check the box for the type of identity document you're submitting, passport, national ID card, etc. Then, enter the issuer, its ID number, and its expiration date, and the date of entry.
Yes. Finally, this is crucial. Enter your date of entry into the United States. If you've never physically entered the U.S., you're right, never enter the United States. Yet this date is vital for establishing U.S. tax residency status and determining eligibility for certain treaty benefits. And as we discussed, remember that passport limitation. Without a date of entry, it won't work as a standalone doc for certain dependents needing U.S. residency proof. Line 6E, previous ITIN ISC. This asks if you've ever received an IIN or IRSN, Internal Revenue Service Number. An IRSN is like a temporary tracking number the IRS might assign if you filed a return without a proper tax ID before. You must check yes and complete 6F if you have. Don't ignore this. Line 6F, previous ITIN details. If you answered yes to 6E, this is where you list any previous ITINs or IRSNs and the name under which they were issued. Absolutely essential for renewals or if you had a temporary number. Helps the IRS find your prior records and avoids major processing delays. Line 6G, Educational Institution Business. This section is specifically for students, professors, or researchers, or those temporarily in the U.S. for business. That's reason F. You enter the name of your school or company, its city, state, and your expected length of stay. Okay, and finally, we come to the signature requirements. This isn't just a formality, folks. A missing or improper signature is an immediate cause for rejection. Straight to the no pile. So who can actually put pen to paper and sign this form? It's not always the applicant themselves, and understanding these rules is paramount. Generally, the applicant themselves is required to sign Form W-7. Pretty straightforward. However, there are specific detailed rules for minors and incapacitated individuals, dependent under 18. If the applicant is a dependent under 18 years of age, their parent or court-appointed guardian can sign if the child is unable to. The parent or guardian must clearly print their name below the signature line and check the box indicating their relationship. For example, parent or court-appointed guardian. If it's the court-appointed guardian signing, a certified copy of the court appointment papers must be attached to the W-7. Proof is needed. If an adult other than a parent or court-appointed guardian is signing for the minor, they need a Form 2848 power of attorney signed by a parent or guardian, specifically authorizing them to sign the W-7 for the minor.
So a POA is needed for other adults signing for a minor. Dependent 18 plus can see. For an applicant who is a dependent 18 years of age or older, the applicant themselves can sign or a court-appointed guardian can sign, again with proof.
They also have the option to appoint a parent or another individual to sign on their behalf, but this again requires a Form 2848 power of attorney from the applicant or their court-appointed guardian.
POA needed for others signing for an adult dependent too. Crucial caution for spouses. Okay, this is a very common mistake. Listen up. A spouse cannot simply sign for their spouse on Form W-7 unless a Form 2848 power of attorney, specifically authorizing them to do so, is attached to the W-7 application. Cannot stress that enough. No automatic spousal signing authority here.
Exactly. Without that specific POA, the application will be rejected. This is often where people get tripped up, thinking spousal privilege extends to signing tax forms like this. It doesn't. Cannot sign name. If an applicant is physically unable to sign their name, they can make a mark like an X or even a thumbprint. But this must be done in the presence of a witness. The witness's signature is also required on the form and must be clearly identified as that of a witness, including their address and phone number.
So mark plus witness signature, POA requirement. One final critical note on power of attorneys. Any POAs submitted to the IRS must be in English or include a certified English translation. If not, they will be considered invalid and your application rejected.
The POA must also clearly state the specific purpose for which it's intended under the Act's authorized section, ensuring it explicitly covers signing the W-7 application. These minute details are critical for ensuring the signature is valid and the entire application proceeds smoothly without a hitch.
Wow. Okay. That truly was an exhaustive deep dive into, well, every facet of Form W-7. It's undeniably clear that while an ITIN doesn't grant all the same benefits or privileges as a Social Security number, it is absolutely indispensable for tax compliance. And crucially, for unlocking specific tax credits and advantageous filing statuses for millions of individuals and families navigating the complex U.S. tax system, we've explored its core purpose, precisely who's eligible, the meticulous step-by-step application process, the surprisingly precise documentation requirements, and exactly where and how to submit it. Understanding those allowable tax benefits and the various exceptions really seems like the key to making sure you're claiming every single tax advantage you're legally entitled to.
Absolutely. And it connects us to the bigger picture. The Form W-7 is far more than just a piece of paper. It's a necessary, often critical, step for millions to responsibly participate in the U.S. tax system and ensure their financial affairs are in order. Understanding these intricate details, especially how an ITIN serves as the gateway to allowable tax benefits like the AOTC for students, the CDCC for families, or even just enabling a more favorable filing status like head of household, well, it can prevent significant tax headaches, avoid penalties, and ensure you claim what you're eligible for, even if it's not a broad tax saving strategy in the conventional sense, like finding a loophole. It's about optimizing your tax situation by fulfilling the necessary identification requirements and ensuring every part of your tax return is complete and accurate. What really stands out to you about how these essential identification numbers truly underpin the ability to navigate financial life and optimize tax obligations, especially when dealing with the complexities of a new country system?
That's a truly fantastic and insightful thought to leave our listener with. It really highlights the foundational role of just having the right ID in the system. Remember, folks, being well informed is your greatest asset in any complex system, especially taxes. Until next time, keep diving deep into knowledge.